Mr.
Thank you, Matt. Professor Matt, why do you propose for the legalization of harmful drugs, including cannabis, just because they are less harmful than alcohol?
I propose that this for two main reasons. One is it is morally right, and the second that it will reduce the harms of those drugs, because many of the harms emerge because the drugs are criminalized.
How is that so? When the harm is caused by the use?
Yes, so the harm is caused by the use, but experience tells us that black market use is usually more harmful than the use in a regulated market. And certainly there are many examples of that in other countries with cannabis. And my country has been particularly damaged by the persistent prohibition of cannabis, leading to the development of more toxic alternatives and more harmful and dangerous variants such as synthetic cannabinoids. And I would not want that to happen in your country.
How does the black market contribute to the usage, which causes harm?
So the economics of the black market are very clear. People who sell drugs on the black market want to encourage drug use because that's how they make their living. So we know that the illicit drug trade in the world is the largest commodity trade apart from oil. It's all unregulated, it's all untaxed, and it's associated with an enormous amount of criminality and harm. Currently, you have told me that in South Africa there are major problems with cannabis as well as alcohol use in the townships. This is an unregulated market. If we could bring it under control, you could at least begin to make sure that what people were taking was what they thought they would take. You could potentially eliminate these contaminated or this cannabis to which has been added other substances which could be more addictive and more toxic.
Professor Nat, do you agree that the issue of medicinal benefit or benefits of cannabis is separate and should be subject to further research?
I believe that medical cannabis is an established...
Short answer, please.
We do not need further research to establish that cannabis is a medicine, no.
Are you aware of the South African Drug Master Plan?
No.
Policy on drugs?
I have read it, but I wouldn't say I was an expert on it, no.
Do you know its purpose? Oh, let me tell you what its purpose is. To develop strategies to combat use of all harmful drugs, including alcohol and tobacco. And it focuses on supply and demand reduction. Isn't that a laudable approach to drugs?
Indeed it is, and I think it's, I commend it. I think it's excellent that it has alcohol and tobacco in the policy, which is more than many countries do, including my own. And I think the approach to reduce demand is a very sensible one. But I also applaud the fact that harm reduction is a key feature of it.
But for you, that's not the way to go. Increase, what you want to see is the increase in the risks of harm.
I do
by
not.
By legalizing harmful substances.
As I have explained, the evidence we have suggests that taking control of a drug out of the black market minimizes, or no, reduces the harm that that drug does to the user and to society. And there are examples of that I have shared with you relating to cannabis. There are many examples relating to other drugs. The black market is the worst place to have a drug sold.
Let's move on, Professor. Can I refer you to file 2? I want to deal with your summaries.
Please.
Page 138.
Yes.
Can you read for me paragraph 2.1.2? After all, these are your summaries.
There is credible scientific evidence to suggest that cannabis is effective in preventing and or treating the conditions of and or symptoms associated with the following.
Just go down the list.
Chronic pain, cancer and the side effects of cancer treatment, HIV and the side effects of HIV treatment.
Can you stop there, please? Are you perhaps an expert in HIV and AIDS?
I am not, no.
Do you know the nature of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in this country?
I do. I have heard of it. It's internationally recognized.
So anyone listening to you, what you said just now, that there are credible scientific evidence to suggest that cannabis can be a cure towards this. Is that not an irresponsible statement to make, particularly in this country, in the context of the epidemic?
I was not saying it was a cure. I was saying
it's not comical.
It could be used, and there is evidence it can be used to.
Where's the evidence?
To assist in the symptoms of HIV, cachexia, wasting, and also nausea from the side effects of treatment. There is evidence to that effect. So this could help your population rather than hinder it.
Where's that scientific evidence?
It's in published literature. I cannot quote it specifically now, but I can find it for you if you like.
Why did you not bring it along?
Because there is an awful lot of literature behind all this.
And that's a problem about you not compiling any report.
Well, my understanding is that I was asked to tell the court of my understanding and expertise in this field, and this is my understanding of where the current evidence takes us, and I am prepared to present to you data on each of those points if you require.
Yes, please bring it. But can you categorically state that cannabis is a cure towards HIV and AIDS?
It is not. It is not a cure for HIV or AIDS. No, it can.
Or effective prevention, whatever you want to call it.
It can treat and or the symptoms associated with. So, it can treat HIV wasting and neuropathic pain of HIV, and the side effects of the treatment. It's not. The point I'm making is it can. Maybe it's important to get this clear for all these points. With the possible exception of epilepsy, cannabis medicines are not a cure. In fact, most medicines are not a cure for these disorders. So what cannabis can do is it can reduce the symptoms of many of these disorders, therefore make the patient's life better whilst they put up with the disorder and go through a remission, or they find other ways of achieving a cure. But it is not in itself a cure except for epilepsy, although even then...
But you're saying it's a prevention.
Well, it will prevent some of these disorders, yes, but prevention is many disorders are lifelong, and you can prevent the symptoms of the disorder. Whether you can prevent the actual emergence of the disorder, that is a different question. Are there any studies that have looked at cannabis preventing the onset of disorders? I don't believe so. These are all symptomatic treatments of a disorder by cannabis.
Wait, that's not what you say there. You say prevention.
Well, I think this is prevention in the sense of relapses, of keeping the disorder at bay. I didn't intend it to be meant as preventing the onset of the disorders.
I'm going to make your task laborious. Please read again 2.1.2.
There is credible scientific evidence to suggest that cannabis is effective in preventing and or treating the conditions of and or symptoms associated with.
Preventing. You want to argue against that?
No, I'm not arguing it can prevent the symptoms. The whole point is the and or the symptoms. It can prevent the symptoms of chronic pain and the symptoms of the side effects of cancer treatment. There is evidence it can even potentially prevent non-cancerous lesions turning into cancer. So there's, that paragraph simply gives you the broad perspective on what cannabis might do. And what you see here is, in most cases, it's providing symptomatic relief. It's helping people with a disorder overcome some of the more unpleasant symptoms of that disorder.
I'm asking this question because we have people who are desperate in this country. And if they hear you make such statements...
It is not me who is... I would never claim it could prevent HIV. I have never intended to make that claim, and I think you're misinterpreting the way I have presented the evidence here.
Would you bring that scientific evidence on Thursday morning?
I will be prepared to do that. Yes.
Can you turn to page 146, please? Paragraph 2.4.1. And I'm dealing with your conclusions flowing from your summaries.
Yes.
Just read 2.4.1.1, please.
The expert does not consider it a rational application of the law to continue to criminalize the use and possession of cannabis whilst allowing people to use and possess more harmful substances such as tobacco and alcohol.
That's your conclusion?
That is my conclusion.
Okay. How do you arrive at that conclusion?
I arrive at that conclusion by examining the considerable data on the harms of cannabis and the harms of other drugs, particularly alcohol and tobacco, that I have been doing for the last over 25 years. And in the light of all that evidence I have read and analyzed, and in the light of the methodology I have developed for determining in a very thorough and transparent way the comparative harms of different drugs, I believe that criminalizing cannabis based on a presumption of harm is inappropriate. It is not only inappropriate, it's doing more harm than good.
What standard of or test of rationality did you use?
The purpose of the law, as I understand it, is to reduce harms to those people who live in the country of its jurisdiction. And I believe the law, in your country as in my country, should be based on a logical analysis of the best way of doing that.
That's your test for rationality.
That the law should be purposeful and achieving the purpose it sets out, and should not be arbitrary in relation to who it criminalizes.
Big words, Professor Nutt. Do you consider yourself qualified to make such a conclusion?
Yes.
No, you're wrong.
Oh.
This is the very issue that this court must decide, not you.
Well, thank you. But this is my opinion, and I believe the law is irrational to penalize people for using cannabis whilst almost encouraging them to use more harmful substances.
You can't express an opinion on the issue on which the court has to decide, Professor Nutt.
Mr. Bokapa, in fairness to the witness, you asked him to express an opinion which is of a legal nature, and you, so...
No, he's already expressed it, my lord.
Yes, but you asked him to deal with the issue of rationality, which is, as you say correctly, within the purview of the court.
Yes.
But you asked him the question, and then he responded to that.
Yes. All I'm trying to say is that he's not qualified to make that conclusion. It's for the court to do that.
Yes, but
That's
I'm
the
saying
point.
you asked him that question, so he answered it.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
You accept that you're not qualified to make that pronouncement or express that opinion?
No, I believe my opinion is my opinion, and I think as someone who has considerable expertise in the field of drug harms and drug policy, it's a reasonable opinion to have, and the court may disagree, but that is my opinion.
You remember right at the beginning I asked you what your field of expertise is? What was your answer?
My expertise is in the field of psychiatry, psychopharmacology, and the harms of drugs.
Yes. (2.4.1.2). Can you read that, please?
The harms of cannabis use, which are relatively minor, are far outweighed by the detrimental effects of criminal prohibition, including the stress of getting caught, facing prosecution, going to prison, where one is exposed to harder drugs and possible life-threatening diseases.
Let's look at cannabis alone. Why do you say harms caused by cannabis are minor? Without comparison, any comparison. And you know what those harms are. We went through them.
The scaling of harms of drugs is a challenging question. One can approach it in several ways. One can approach it in relation to the harms of other drugs, which you don't want me to do anymore. You can approach it in comparison with the harms of other activities that people engage with, which can cause them harm, like playing rugby, like scuba diving, like horse riding. And you can approach it statistically, the proportion of people who use the drug who will come to harm. And on all those three measures, I would argue that the harms of cannabis are relatively minor. The majority of people who use it do not come to harm. There are legal activities which are more harmful or more risky than cannabis use. And as I've said already today, it's less harmful than drugs which the state promotes, such as alcohol.
Professor Nutt, can you say without any comparison that cannabis does not cause harm?
It does cause harm. I have expressed all through my testimony, it is a harmful drug. All drugs are harmful. But the harms of cannabis are, as I say here, relatively minor, and are outweighed by the detrimental effects of criminal prohibition. The fact that 1,000 people a day, I believe, are arrested for cannabis possession in this country. And we know that getting a record, a criminal record for cannabis possession is extraordinarily deleterious to young people. And we know in some countries the imprisonment rate for cannabis is extremely high and very disproportionate to the harms that these individuals would suffer from using cannabis.
Professor Nat, do you think that the harms caused by cannabis are minor in the South African context?
I believe they are, but I am not an expert. And in your context, I believe the harms to the user would be the same as in other countries. There may be particular social aspects which I am not an expert in.
Yes. Well, this is where I'm going to end it for today. As we discussed, there's some bundle of documents that we still need to go through. We'll proceed with Professor Nat on Thursday.
Yes. Just for the benefit of, did you wish to?
Apologize, my Lord. Might I seize the opportunity, if I may, to again, at the risk of being impertinent, my Lord, inquire from your Lordship if your Lordship is again prepared to start earlier on Thursday.
Yes, it would be both on Thursday and Friday at 9:30.
Thank you, my Lord.
That's in order.
We agree.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of the public, the parties have come to an arrangement in order to consider certain documents presented by counsel for the 8th defendant, that they need some time to peruse them, and therefore the court will adjourn today until Thursday morning, Wednesday being a public holiday, on Thursday morning at 9:30. The court adjourns.